those of us who tend to want to say that we believe God or trust God in faith, because it's not only that I come in here and express my joy in church, but even in the face or in the midst of adversity, I have to learn how to express the same joy that I feel in the house of God outside of the house of God. For the Bible begins to tell us in the book of Nehemiah, the 8th chapter, verse number 10, that it is the joy of the Lord that is our strength. Now, when you begin to look at what Paul was going through, from a human point, everything seemed to be going against him. But despite this, Paul remained confident that God's purpose would not be shaken in his life. He writes in the scripture, chapter number 1, verse number 19 and 20, "For I know that what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. Yeah. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether it is by life or whether it is by death." As we begin to look at the very verses that we have today, to understand this verse in its entirety, we have to understand the word ashamed. Does somebody say ashamed? We that study the Bible must understand that when the biblical writers wrote different words, that even though today we understand its meaning, it's not basically what it is understood today as it was back then. As we begin to look at the word ashamed, it is not in our dictionaries today. When you look up the word ashamed or shamed in the dictionary today, it is a painful emotion excited by consciousness of guilt. It means disgrace or dishonor. Y'all know how it feels to make a fool of yourself. That is what it means to be ashamed. I can remember growing up in school, and I was going to the Brookview Elementary School. I could remember that when I went to the school, and of course it was nothing like having recreation. I remember that we were outside, and Sister Roz, it had been raining that day, and the coach told us that it was our time to run around the track and the field. So Joy, as I was running around the track and the field, had my nice little outfit on, because in elementary school you don't have gym clothes. So I began to run around the track and did not understand that there was a grass puddle or a puddle of mud right there. Oh, y'all gonna help me talking here. And so as I was running around the field, everybody running around, but here I am running and not paying attention of what's ahead of me. And what do? I slip and fall in the puddle of mud. Y'all ain't gonna help me here. And what happens to me is that it was before lunchtime. Didn't have no changeable clothes and was too prideful to go to the lost and found and find some clothes that did not belong to me. So I had made a fool of myself and became ashamed, and therefore I skipped lunch. Y'all ain't gonna help me in here. And it just so happened that it was the day that they served those square pizzas with the little square. Oh, y'all gonna act like y'all don't remember that. Look at your neighbor in church and say, "Neighbor, I know what it is to be shamed. I know what it is to be embarrassed. I know what it is to make a fool of myself and wish I hadn't have done what I did." Look at somebody and say, "I got a shame story too. I got a shame story too." But as we begin to look at the word, the biblical meaning of shame, that we have to understand what it means. The biblical understanding has to deal with disappointment. Somebody say disappointment. According to scripture, the person who is not ashamed is the person whose trust is not misplaced, and therefore is never disillusioned. The meaning is unmistakable at several important places in the Bible. I'll give you just one so we can save a little time. When you read in Romans, the 5th chapter, verse number 5, Paul begins to write about the Christian hope, noting that hope Philippians 1:19-20. Hopefully, Sister Keita, they'll stay with me while I can bless them. And when you look at Paul is now on a trial for his life. And if you can imagine where he must be in his mental stability, that in a human point of view, it seems as if his outcome is uncertain. Oh, and I believe that we also know what it means or what it feels like to be uncertain. That when you go through different things in your life, Sister Felicia, you don't always know how it's going to end up. The truth of the matter is that is our human or our fleshly point of view. But those of us that walk by faith and not by sight, that we understand as the scripture or Paul has written it in Romans 8:28, that we know that all things, I'm preaching better than y'all responding, all things work together for our good.